Hi everyone, Alex Tardy here from the National Weather Service out of San Diego. Wow, what an onslaught of Pacific storms and atmospheric rivers over about a 2-week period. Here's a look at the San Diego River. These photos were taken in the morning of January 16th along the San Diego River, where about 14 swiftwater rescues occurred. Now, it wasn't just heavy precipitation leading to flooding and big mountain snow. The high winds, which accompany atmospheric rivers and Pacific storms, and the heavy rainfall led to trees falling down, mudslides, rock slides, numerous across Southern California, and last but not least, the high surf pounding on the beaches led to extensive coastal flooding along Orange and San Diego counties. We're going to take a look at the weather pattern and some of the highlights of this active weather period starting in late December and ending in mid-January. Atmospheric rivers, bomb cyclones. Great prediction of these atmospheric phenomena occurred for California, but the impacts were large. I mentioned earlier the San Diego River having swiftwater rescues. Most of those occurred during the dark hours, early morning hours of January 16, 2023. How much rain occurred? Here's a look at precipitation over the past 30 days between the period December 21 and January 19th. The blue and purple shaded areas, almost all of California, receiving 2 to 4 times as much compared to normal for that 30-day period. You can see the signature extended all the way inland across the Great Basin. Okay, well, these are a lot of numbers to digest. Take a look at your favorite climate location, perhaps one near you. On the right-hand side, we started the year with some large deficits. Those deficits still remain, but our water year is now approaching, in some locations in the mountains and along the coast and valleys, our seasonal averages, which are posted on the far right. So for example, in San Diego, this water year, 7.51 inches so far. Our deficit starting the year was over 10 inches. But we are now in January close to our seasonal average of 9.79 inches. Sometimes it's also good to look at local and specific locations. Let's take Palomar Mountain in San Diego County at 6,000 feet. You can see so far this year, much more precipitation has occurred than the past 2, but also we're up close to our seasonal average. You can see the other wet years we had, 2018, 19, and 2016, 17 show up very well on here. Okay, another look at it, percent of average. Right-hand side is the water year, and the left-hand side is the past 30 days. Again, zoomed up on California, purple shaded areas are 2 to 4 times as wet compared to average in those periods. Again, if you look at the percent of average across the West since October 1st, the water year start, the dark green shaded areas are where we have done the best and also excessive. 130 to 180% of average for the water year in those dark green shaded areas. We made some progress in far northern California as well. We remain drier than we should be in the deserts of the Southwest. Now, let's take a look at the ranking. Over a 3-week period, so starting late December into mid-January, the rankings are shown here. How wet were these climate locations? You can see in Central California, San Francisco, Stockton, they were all number 1. So the wettest period on record for that period, late December through mid-January. The mountains as well, number 1. If you go into Southern California, you can see we've had wetter periods, except Santa Barbara, number 1. But down in LA and San Diego, single digits. So that means we've had several years during that period in the heart of our winter where it's been wetter than what we recently saw. Okay, a lot more numbers here again, but we're looking at specific locations such as San Diego on the left-hand side. We can see that in the past several years, regardless of La Nina or El Nino, it's either been wet or dry. So some of our wettest years on record recently have been La Nina years such as 2010, 2011, and also 2016 through 17. Let's take a look at percent of average precipitation on a map for key locations. You can see across Southern California, most of those locations are 2 times as wet compared to normal for this time of year, for the entire water year starting October 1. Now let's look at the snowpack. The snowpack percent of average water equivalent. You can see that even in Southern California, as that picture shows, and the data shows, 3 times as much snow compared to average. And much of the southern Sierra Nevada, 2 to 3 times as much compared to average. We're not just talking about Sierra Nevada snowpack here. Mount Baldy, Southern California, where about 14 search and rescues have occurred in the past 3 weeks. Also, large amounts of snow and ice, up around 9,000, 10,000 feet. Here's a closer look at the camera pointed on San Gorgonio from Noble Creek, as recorded by the Riverside County Flood Control. Snowpack, really important for water supply and for drought. The current 2023 snowpack in the Sierra Nevada is now higher than any previous year on record, even higher than 82, 83 for this time of year. You can see the blue area there, and the blue area is also indicating the percent of average for April. So if it didn't snow again, we would still be above average for snowfall. Pretty remarkable. Other years are shown as well. Across the state, it is averaging about 126% of average for April 1st. 2.5 times for this date, but if we were to fast forward to April 1st, we would be above average for snowpack. The Sierra Nevada precipitation, which includes also water or rainfall, is currently 155% of average. You can see it is outpacing almost all years except for the record 2016-2017. We'll talk a little bit more about that year. In the southern Sierra Nevada, the 5-station index also is very close to the wettest year, 82-83 and 2016-2017. The water supply ultimately is our measure of drought. The reservoirs have significantly increased over the past 3 weeks with the onslaught of storms that we've talked about. Now most of the major reservoirs are at least near or at the historical averages. Take a look at some of the gains. The big reservoirs like Shasta and Oroville almost doubling in storage. What about the atmospheric rivers? Well, here's a look at the atmospheric rivers all the way back to October, the start of the water year. This tracks the strongest part of the atmospheric river and shows how strong they were. You can see Southern California has taken direct hits November 8th and then also January 14th and 16th. Central California, with some of the biggest problems has also taken direct hits by moderate and strong atmospheric rivers. Across California overall, here's the total count. You can see that there's been 10 moderate and 4 strong and 1 extreme that has made landfall on the coast. Okay, let's look back in time. Have we ever seen a weather pattern like this? Well, we can look at a historical 1862 year for California, and we can look at 2023. Some similarities show up with an anomaly or a very large storm system that was persistent for several weeks a persistent weather pattern pointed at California even in 1862, as well as this year, 2023. Now, if we look at the recent weather pattern closer, we can see an extended Pacific jet stream from west to east across the entire Pacific Ocean, average jet stream on the left-hand side. However, the average jet stream is similar to what we see in the opposite of what's going on, an El Nino pattern. A look at the anomaly or departure from average for our recent weather pattern over the past 2 to 3 weeks shows the jet stream extending across the entire Pacific, pointed right at Central California. Much unusual, and why we have resulted in record snowpack and excessive rainfall. I mentioned El Nino. We are currently in La Nina for the third consecutive year, as shown here on a satellite image, January 18th. Now, much of the central northern Pacific is above average, warmer than normal, and that's been the case over the past several years. But La Nina is still in effect. If we look at prior years that were wet, and we talked about these years like December 2010, and we also talked about February 2019, jet stream was coming in from the southwest, pointed right across Central California. Now the 82-83 and the 2017 years, which show up in those charts, much different. An extended, elongated jet stream, a lot like what we just saw recently over a 3-week period. The past winters that we've had, nothing like that. If we look back to when the drought started in 2019, 2020, it was very amplified or up and down like a roller coaster. Resulted in wet in SoCal, dry in Northern California. The following year, 2020-21, was very dry. Most of the storms went north of California. Then the next year, the jet stream shifted a little bit, but still missing most of California. That's our 3 years of drought in California that resulted from the weather pattern of those years. Well, thanks for tuning in and watching this video presentation, quickly highlighting the recent active 3 weeks of weather in California with the onslaught of Pacific storms and atmospheric rivers, and comparing it to some other years and showing you what the state of the climate currently is.